going on, guys? Charles Weinraub AKA the Handsome Homebuyer. And this holiday season, we made a pilgrimage. You see me now. I always usually look like shit. But for the purposes of this podcast, absolutely not. I got dressed up a little bit. And we are talking to the man, Eric Jensen, who is the only true Italian bespoke suit maker in the country. Enjoy. Bing, 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 Dear kid, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Handsome Homebuyer podcast. My name is Charles, aka the Handsome Homebuyer, aka Captain Permit, aka That's right. And on today's podcast, we have something very different, totally outside the box, which is very cool. I've been waiting months. I'm super excited about it. Met this gentleman about 6 months ago. Feel like I've known him my entire life.
Longer than 6 months. It's been like a year and a half.
No, it hasn't been a year and a half.
It's been a year and a half, yeah, because we did your suits, and then that was in my old location. And then I've been here for almost a year.
So you've been telling me ever since I met you, like every time I come in basically looking like half a homeless man, and you just look at me like, bro, like you're like a real estate developer. You gotta turn you into an Italian gentleman. So just to give a little bit of backstory on how we met and all that. Believe it or not, you might find this hard to believe because all people see me is sweatshirts trudging into houses that smell like cat pee every day. And running around in a dusty office. I actually have a big love for fashion.
Yeah.
I worked at Kenneth Cole back in the day, and then for a brief moment, I actually took sewing and design classes at a local community college.
Did I tell you that? No, I didn't know that.
See, I took sewing and design classes because when I was in Kenneth Cole, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I want to be a fashion designer.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and that didn't last that long. And again, usually, I'm not the most dapper of dressers, but there's one thing that I've appreciated for a very long time and searched for literally 5 years, and that is a beautiful, custom, bespoke suit. And we're going to define that.
Yeah.
Because nobody really knows. Like, it took me years of education to understand that.
Yeah, it took me going to Rome, so.
So just to round out the backstory, so I spent literally 5 years on YouTube, reading articles, trying to find a truly custom suit. So I'll let you explain in a minute what bespoke means and all that. And I found that they really weren't around.
No, yeah, that's true.
Like you're in New York, which you kind of I mean we're biased, or at least I'm biased. I think it's like the center of the universe.
Yeah, I mean in regards to the United States, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
You would think with all the money and everything here that you'd be able to get something like that, but like. You can't. You have to go to, Savile Row, or you have to go to Italy, or
yeah. You got to wait for one of them to travel to New York. So like you have bespoke tailors in Italy and bespoke tailors on Savile Row, and they'll travel to the United States. So they'll hit up like New York, Dallas, maybe Chicago and San Francisco or LA, but they come twice a year.
Yeah.
So you place an order with them, you got to wait for them to come through. And so you what could be a 5-month process turns into like a 2-year process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that said, I met Mr. Eric Jensen of Sartoria Gallo NYC, and I got 2 custom suits, and it literally, it changed my life. First of all, a lot of people go out and they waste money and they'll go to like a suit supply or a department store. Not to say these places are bad.
No.
They're not, and for the money, but it never really fits right. You sit down and it's like uncomfortable. It's not a pleasant experience.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Wearing a suit.
Well, the difference is, and I guess we could get into that now. The difference is that that's a made-to-measure or a custom program, as opposed to a bespoke program. So everyone nowadays, 99.9% of the stores in the United States are selling a product of custom-made or made-to-measure. And basically what that is they take a block pattern, which is a block idea of what a human should be, and they let you customize a few things, and they change minor things. So they'll take in the waist of the trousers, they'll take in the waist of the coat, they'll maybe lengthen it or shorten it a little, and then you can pick your lapel and your fancy lining. Yes, so you can get your skull and crossbones lining, things like that.
Which is like the one thing that you don't allow. You're like, no, that's not how we do it.
No, but because in the custom world, that's how they make you feel like this is your personal piece.
Yeah.
Okay. But in the bespoke world, every aspect of that suit is specifically yours.
Yeah.
No other human being can put that coat on and it fit them in the same way that it fits you. So that's because we build a pattern specifically that's yours. So you have a Charles pattern hanging in our pattern block. and it hangs there, and every time you order, we take that pattern down and we build your suit off of it. We adjust it every time that we make a suit for you. So your first and second suits are great, but your third, fourth, and fifth suits are going to be even better. Because every time that we are working on your pattern, we're adjusting. And we're always making it better because we can always do better, because that's what we always want to strive for. The other thing about our suits is they're almost 90% handmade. So each coat has about 30 to 40,000 hand play stitches in each suit coat. It takes us 80 hours just to make your coat of your suit. It takes us about another 20 to make your trousers. So all that goes into this bespoke process, and no piece is left to chance. Every piece of that suit is entirely and specifically yours, down to your lapel width, down to where we place your pockets, things like that.
So just so people understand, basically you come in and you measure, top to bottom, and you create a paper pattern.
Correct.
And people are unaware. It's like, I was really unaware of this until I actually put on the suits, which it's literally like wearing another skin.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like armor, and it's beautiful. And you just you sit and you're comfortable. But I started looking at my body. I'm like, you know what? My shoulder is jacked up. Like, I got a shoulder that's like here and another shoulder that's here. And it's just, you don't realize how, unless you're getting a bespoke product from someone like yourself, it's never going to fit right.
No, yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. Like, if you take care of these things, they last forever. So for me, it's worth it to spend the money to get something that you really look and feel amazing in.
Oh, exactly. And that's the thing. It's not only an investment of the client's money, but it's also an investment of the tailor's time. And because both of those things are investments into this piece, our goal and our job is to make it last as long as it possibly can, as long as the cloth will allow it to last. So, no one is going to put in 80 to 100 hours of work into a garment and have it not last, at least 20, 25 years, because that's just a waste of time. So yeah, that's our other goal, is to make sure. And so that reason as well is everything that we do has to transcend time and fashion. So we never want to adhere to fashions in the bespoke world, because once you adhere to fashion, you've pigeonholed yourself, and so you're going to wear that suit for 20 years, and someone's going to go, oh, those lapels are like from 20 years ago. You got these tiny little, razor thin lapels, and, why are you wearing that stupid suit? But if you find a suit, or if you make the suit in a way that's perfectly, yours and works for you, and then also transcends time and fashion, then you can continue to wear that suit for 20 years, and you'll never be out of style.
No, it makes sense. So people right now that are wearing those super, super narrow legs, those things, they were in when the Beatles were in, they came in now, and then they'll go out and you won't be able to wear that suit for another 40 years.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, watch, in 1 to 2 years, you're going to see the legs of the trousers getting wider and wider, the lapels of the coats getting wider and wider, because they got to sell you something, right? So if you have a closet full of tiny little lapels and tight trousers, well, you don't need any more suits. But if fashion dictates that everything starts changing the opposite direction and you realize you're out of style, you then are forced to get rid of those old suits and buy a new wardrobe.
So I have a feeling, and I might be wrong, but I have this little bit of the premonition where I feel like everything in life cycles.
Oh,
so 20, like I'm 42, 20 years ago I was going to clubs and there was dress codes.
Yeah.
Now you have people in like $500 sweatshirts and they look like shit.
Yeah.
And I feel like everything cycles, so like the well-dressed gentleman is coming back.
I feel like it is. I feel like especially for our generation and a little bit younger, they're starting to realize that they want to pay a little more attention to themselves.
Yeah.
And it's also fun for them because they're learning new skills. Like, my father never taught me how to tie a tie. So like when I started wearing ties, I had to like figure out how to tie a tie. But when my dad was a kid and his father was a kid, that was like something they got taught, was how to tie a tie. So now I feel like these kids are realizing, oh, like I was never trained this, and now I'm learning this new way of dressing, this new way of expressing myself, and while maintaining this formality. So yeah, I think it's coming back.
So I want to get into why you do this, because
I'm insane. No, I'm just kidding.
Why do you do it? And then I want to talk about like the process of what you went through, because this is a very tough business.
Yes.
It is extremely labor intensive, so
Yes.
it's difficult to scale, which we'll talk about later. You're literally trying to scale the unscalable.
Yes.
And that's really the reason why there's not a lot of you around, because it's a tough business model for that reason.
Yeah, there's not a lot of us around, I think, because tailors in the United States, and there's very few of them, you could probably count them on one hand, have been not very faithful stewards to the craft. Not to put them down, but I think that they're phenomenal human beings, and what they've done with their craft is, some of the most beautiful stuff I've seen. But at the same time, they haven't been responsible with it. They've had tailors who have, made for them, and that's been their core made for them tailors. And then those guys started dying, and then the tailor has gotten old, and that guy's gotten old to the point where he's like, I'm done. And they just kind of close up shop.
Yeah.
And so while in the differences is in Italy and in London or in England, they're taking the youth and they're going, okay, we'll build you up. And so they're growing a new crop of talent. And in the United States, we've just kind of given up on it.
Are they interested in doing that in other countries? It's like
yeah. So like there's a school on Savile Row that the Savile Row tailors, or two tailors work with. There's a school that I went to, which we can talk about that too.
Yep.
And that's still going to this day and still generating tailors, or generating the opportunity for students to become tailors. But here in the United States, we don't have anything like that. So we've kind of embraced this idea that you go to college, and once you go to college, then you get a job, and you get that job, and you stick with that job, and that's your thing. We haven't really celebrated this craftsmanship in the United States, so we don't really have this push for an apprenticeship idea, or this idea that maybe you don't need to go to college, maybe you should, maybe you should use your hands or work in the arts or something like that. So what I did was I went to college and graduated in something that I didn't really, end up using.
What did you go for?
I went for philosophy theology.
Okay.
So it was like, all right, so you either go and get your PhD and become a professor, and then it's like, well, that's another, 6 to 10 more years. So I just kind of went into the finance field. So I worked at TD Ameritrade.
Okay.
And then in 2009, when everything kind of went to hell with the housing market and Bear Stearns and all that stuff, I was the first one into TD Ameritrade, and because of that, I was the first one out.
Last one in, first one out. Yeah.
So, or not the first one, the last one in and the first one out. So anyways, I got laid off, and I told my wife that I wanted to do something fun. I didn't want to work in a cubicle anymore. She said, well, what do you want to do? And I'd seen this guy downtown San Diego who looked like he was making bespoke suits, and I had read this article about Savile Row, and I was super interested. So I said, I want to learn how to make suits. And my wife was like, what, really? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, all right, go for it, but just don't quit. So it's still to this day, this always hits the back of my brain whenever I'm frustrated. It's my wife telling me you can't quit. So I was like, all right, I won't. So I went down.
How important, just to quit, how important do you think having her and saying that and that support system was?
I would have been gone. I would not be sitting here today.
It's that hard.
It's that hard. It's that hard. So anyways, I'll tell you. Mm-hmm. So I went down to the guy in San Diego. I went into his shop and I said, I want to learn how to do this. And he looked at me, he's like, how old are you? And I was like 25 at the time. I said, 25. And he goes, no one under 75 is doing this. Why do you want to do this? And I was like, I don't know. I just find it beautiful. And he's like, all right, well, I'm not going to stop you. If you come in, you come in.
Wow.
And, you can watch me work. I'll see. So I was like, all right. So the next day I showed up, came in. I watched him work. He didn't have anything for me to do because as an apprentice in tailoring, you're useless. So if you're useless, they can't give you anything to do. But you can watch, you can learn, you can kind of pick things up. And that's what I've always been good at, I've always been good at watching something happening and processing it in my brain and then, figuring it out that way. So I'd watch him work, and then one day he was like, all right, I'll teach you how to make buttonholes, because we make our buttonholes by hand.
Yeah.
So they take about 15 to 20 minutes per buttonhole if you're good. So I was like, okay. So he gives me this cloth and he cuts the buttonhole for me and gives me the thread, and he shows me how he does it. Well, he hadn't made buttonholes in probably like 30 years. His wife makes the buttonholes. So he was like, I think this is how she does it. So he shows me. So I work on that for like 2 months.
Wow. Just doing buttonholes.
Watching him and doing buttonholes.
It's tedious handwork.
Yeah,
it's all handwork.
It's all handwork. So it's literally you pass the needle kind of halfway through, you wrap it, you pull it, and you create this knot, and it's this little pearl that sits, and it goes all the way down the line and all the way back.
How many times have you stabbed yourself?
Oh, too many times. The worst is when it goes in between the nail.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. But now I'm to the point where I think if I stab myself
it's like leather.
It's like, there's nothing.
Like
nothing comes out.
Nothing happens.
Usually you're like bleeding profusely and it's all over the client's coat or whatever, but nowadays it just stabs and you're just like, I cut myself. So anyways, so I did that. Then this guy comes in, and he's got his suits made all over the world, and he's a friend of the tailor, and he said, oh, you're trying to learn this? I said, yeah, I really want to. He said, oh, you should learn in Italy. And I said, yeah, right, man. I was like, I just got laid off. I've got a wife. We're living in San Diego. We're not swimming in money. And he's like, no, I'm serious. Like, he's like, you got a house? And I said, no, we rent. He said, you got any kids? I said, no. And he said, so what's stopping you? I said, all right, well, we'll see. So he told me about Maestro Gallo, and he's starting up this school in Rome. And then he told me about the Brioni school as well. So I went home, told my wife. She said, well, why not? Why don't we just try?
Wow.
So I was like, all right, well, the only one I know is Brioni, so I'll try that. So I contacted Brioni here in New York. I said, how do you get into the school in Italy? And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the Brioni school to learn how to make suits. And they said, I don't think anyone can get it. I think you have to be born there. And like this Brioni, this company that has stores all over the world, had no idea how to get like an American into their school to learn tailoring. So I was like, all right, well, this is pointless.
Oh, so they never came back with an answer?
No, they had no idea. Like someone was like, oh, I'll talk to so-and-so. I got all the way up the chain. I might have even talked to the CEO at one point. He had no idea how to get someone in there. So I was like, all right, this is pointless. So I contacted Maestro Gallo. And I told him my situation and everything. And he said his daughter spoke some English. Maestro Gallo speaks no English. And so she said, tell us your story, tell us why you want to come, and we'll see if we accept you. So I told them, they said, all right, we'll accept you. You got to pay your way, you got to figure, because we never had they were like, we've never had an American come.
You were the first American
I was the first
ever?
American ever to go.
You don't know how to speak Italian?
At that point, no.
You go in Italy to learn how to be a tailor, and nobody speaks English.
Yeah, nobody speaks English. The daughter speaks like broken English. So I was like, all right. So I tell Rachel, and she's like, all right, let's do it. So I worked like delivering pizzas, getting paid under the table. I collected my unemployment at the same time, or my unemployment, got my pizza delivery money under the table, saved everything. My wife worked a corporate job at that time, which was great because she brought in some more money, and sold everything we owned.
Wow.
Like literally everything we owned. I think we left with 3 suitcases of clothes, and that's it. And that was mostly hers. So we sold everything we owned. We went through the visa situation, which was a pain. We got our tickets and everything. We're flying into Rome, and we're descending to land at Fiumicino, the Roman airport, and it just hits me. I'm like, oh, what are we doing? Like, this is insane. And the other thing was, you have to, for your visa, you have to get like a place to stay before you go. So you have to show the Italian consulate that you have a place to live. Well, how the hell do you do that if you don't speak the language and you have like no money? So we found this school outside of Rome that was a theology school, and they rented rooms.
Okay.
So we contacted them, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll rent you a room. It was dirt cheap, and the guy who was renting us the room was like, oh, and by the way, if you want, I'll pick you up from the airport. I was like, oh, great, what a nice guy. And he said, I'll be the guy outside of baggage claim with a Canada hat and a newspaper. And I was like, okay. So we're descending in Rome, and I'm like, my whole entire future rests on if there's a man outside of baggage claim with a Canada hat and a newspaper, because I don't know where this room is.
It sounds exciting, though.
Yeah, it was crazy. And Rachel's like having a great time, and everything's hitting me, like, because I feel like I got to take care of her. I drag her halfway across the world. I got to know what I'm doing. Anyways, luckily there was a guy with a Canada hat and a newspaper. So he drives us out, and then he goes, you guys need tickets to go back into Rome? And we said, yeah, because we're going to go every day to Rome to go to school, because we were outside. So he's like, all right, I'll help you get your bus and metro tickets. And I said, okay. So we drive back into the little city center. We go to the newspaper stand, because that's where you buy your tickets apparently. And we had taken like a little bit of Rosetta Stone. So remember that program back in the day?
Yeah, of course.
Like Rosetta Stone, yeah. So I was like, all right, I learned some Italian. I should know something. And I knew the word for ticket was biglietto. Okay, so I knew at some point this man and this woman's going to have this conversation about getting tickets, and someone's going to say biglietto, because that's tickets, right? So I'm listening for biglietto, and he says bibbidi bobbidi boo, and she says bobbidi bobbidi boo, and they come back and forth, and nobody says biglietto, and he turns to me and goes, all right, they don't have a monthly pass, but they got a weekly. It's going to be X amount of euro. And I said, okay. I gave him the euro. And then he talked to her, and nobody said biglietto, and I don't have a clue how they got these, tickets without saying the word for ticket. Anyways, he gives me the stuff, and then he leaves us there, and he's like, all right, I'm going to go do some more errands. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we're in the middle of some town in Rome or in Italy, and I have no idea how to get back to my room. So anyways, that all hit me, and it was just crazy. But everything about kind of that whole journey was like that, because like you said, like with the school, nobody spoke Italian, so I learned by failing.
Yeah.
So, I'd do what the maestro thought I was supposed to do, and he'd come by and go, "What the heck are you doing?" And he'd tell me to rip it, which I learned that word fast, scoochie. So scoochie means rip it. Okay. So I had to take it all apart and redo it again. So that's how I learned. So it was through failure that I learned, how to do it. But it was pain.
So talk about the training process and how long you were there and what you had to go through.
So I was there for 3 years, and we went from 9 in the morning till 2 p.m., and then everyone left, and then I would sneak back in and work with the master coat maker until he left at 7 p.m. So I'd spend as much time as humanly possible about this stuff because we're living off savings.
Yeah.
And so I'd watch my savings, dwindle, and I was like, well, if I don't learn all this in 3 years, I'm screwed. So
wow.
Yeah. So I did everything I could to learn, and finagled, and every time everyone else was doing their work, I'd watch them. And when the master coat maker would come around and show them what they did or didn't do wrong, I'd watch and I'd be over them, and every chance I got. And we started with making vests. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to make a vest by hand, and then we moved to making trousers, and then we moved to making coats. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it's that easy, but it's not that easy, because every stitch that you put into this coat has to be precise, and if it's wrong, any wrong stitch is going to screw up later. Because it's almost like building a house. You would understand this. So if your foundation is good, then the next step is good. But then your walls go up, and if your walls are wrong, then if any stage in that process anything's off or tweaked, your whole house is screwed by the time you put the paint on.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah, it's a domino effect. So it's that same thing when we put the canvas into the coat. It's floating.
Yeah.
It's a floating canvas, and it has to sit at the same amount of tension throughout that coat, from shoulder down to the bottom, or you're going to get a fullness in the coat that you don't want, or a tightness in the coat that you don't want. It's going to have it kick somewhere.
Explain that to people. Explain what a floating canvas is so people understand.
Yeah, so 99.999% of your suits out there are fused, which is this fabric that has glue to it. And what they do is they glue it to the cloth, basically. So it gives it that kind of strength and that feeling of a jacket, but it's just glued there. And over time, that glue breaks down, and then you'll see bubbling in your coat or things like that. Or if it gets too humid or too much steam on it, it'll do that. Then other people have decided, well, we'll use a half canvas. So canvas is made out of usually goat, so it's a goat woven fiber, and or linen or something like that. So they'll glue half of it, and they'll do a canvas in the other one. Our canvas is all one piece with another piece of horsehair canvas on it. So that's your chest canvas, and we roll that. It's easier to explain if you have it, but anyways. And then that is basted into the coat and then held there just by the pocket and the shoulder and the sleeve and the lapel. So it's floating, it's moving. So there's a layer of cloth and a layer of canvas, but they are together, but they're not together, if that makes any sense.
So before you had said you were basically working twice as hard as everybody else there, and you only had 3 years. So most people would say, 3 years is a really long time. How long does it really take to get to the level where you are considered a master tailor? So
if you went the route of being an apprentice, it'd take you 15 to 20 years. If you went the route of going to a school where they focused directly on this, which is what I did, then I shortened that. I got probably 9 years and 3 years. Okay, so I still had another 6 to 11 years left in order to become a maestro, or even an adequate tailor, to be honest, to be called tailor. So, so if you went through apprenticeship, you'd take 15, 20 years. I did 9 years and 3 years because we expedited the process. They taught us how to cut. They taught us how to do some fitting. They taught us how to make patterns. They taught us how to make coats from scratch, vests and trousers. If you could do all that, that usually would take you 20 years. So once I was done with my apprenticeship in Rome, I had to find a second place to apprentice. And I was out of money, so I couldn't stay in Rome because we were down to our last cigarette, basically. And so we came back to the United States. I asked a guy who's a great cutter and fitter in Chicago, who was a fantastic tailor. I don't know if he still is working, but I asked him if I could work under him. And he said, I don't know how good you are. I know that you trained under somebody, but I don't know what their method is. Because every tailor has different methods of doing things. But he said, if you come out here, I'm not going to kick you out. So I said, okay.
Same thing as last time.
So I got a job at Nordstrom. They allowed me to transfer to Chicago. So we transferred to Chicago, and I started working in the mornings at Nordstrom or in the afternoons at Nordstrom. And then after work, I would go and work with Chris, the tailor in Chicago, because he kept weird hours. He would start work at like 4 p.m. and finish at like 9 or like 11 or 12, which is the craziest thing. But when you're working a day job, it really helps you out as an apprentice. So I apprenticed under him for another 5 years, and then he paid me for 2 years, and then I realized that I just couldn't keep working under him because I wasn't learning, I wasn't growing, I was staying stagnant. And my wife and my mother-in-law were talking to me about it, and they both said, well, what's your ideal situation? I said, well, the best would be to start my own shop in New York. And they're like, all right, well, we should do that. So we saved everything we owned again, and we moved out here to New York. And I got a job helping a buddy of mine adjust his patterns for his trousers because he just bought a factory and didn't know what he was doing. So I was adjusting his patterns and making sure that they were up to quality standards and quality controlling his place for him. So he paid me to do that for a year. And then I set up on my own here in New York and got 5 clients, and 5 turned into 10, and 10 turned into 15 and 20. And yeah, finally got to here.
I want to talk about, because again, I watch all your videos and I watch a ton of these different videos, but what nobody ever talks about, interesting, is how the businessman or businesswoman meets the artist.
It's terrifying.
Because it's like, I mean, because they're different kind of like, different brains, different parts of you, or sometimes people have one thing and they don't have the other. Like, I can't hammer a nail, but I've built over 400 houses in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You're doing both. And you're also, again, like we started to kind of come full circle, you're trying to scale the unscalable.
Yeah.
So you're trying to do, like, the product is obviously expensive, but it's expensive because the material is quality and it takes a very long time to make.
Yes.
So how do you go about scaling a business like that?
Well, so the answer to that is in twofold. I'll start with the first one. First one is I started on my own, started my shop on my own. Figured, how hard could it be? I know how to make coats, I know how to fit. I can do everything. So I started on my own, where you bought a suit from me, I made your pattern, I cut your pattern, I put it together for a fitting, I broke down your fittings, I replaced your fittings, I did everything, and then I built your coat all the way from piece of cloth to the finished product.
By yourself?
By myself,
Yeah.
no help. And then I was like, all right, this is getting overwhelming, but I can still do it. But
Because how many suits can you make in a year if you're doing it by yourself?
Not as many as you had anticipated, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Not as many as I thought I could. So then I got to the point where clients were like, whoa, this is taking a really long time. And so then I was like, yeah, I know, but I'm doing everything. So then I was like, well, maybe I'll find help. Well, then you realize there's not a talent pool.
Yeah.
Like you don't put up an ad on monster.com, for a bespoke tailor and get like 150 applications. You put up an ad for a bespoke tailor, you get nobody except for someone who's maybe worked in a factory. But those are completely different skills.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, then I got to train someone. And so it got to the point where it was like, I can't do this anymore. So I reached out to my maestro in Rome, and I said, we make the same suit because you trained me. And I never deviated from Maestro Gallo's pattern because I thought he made the most beautiful stuff. And so I was like, I make the exact same thing as you. Could you help me make? If I send you stuff, could you help me make the coats and the trousers? And he said, Eric, we're not a factory. Like, we're a bespoke tailor shop. We don't do cut, make, trim for people. He said, but you've trained under us. You've been a part of us for a while. We respect your work. You do the same as us, so we'll do it for you. But we wouldn't do this for anybody else. I said, thank you. That's incredible. And it was an honor. And then he said, maybe someday we'll ask something of you. And I said, okay. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah. So I started sending him my stuff. They were sending it back. Everything was working great. And then his son, Marco, who's slowly taking over the business in Rome, reached out and said, Eric, what would you say, since this is working so well, if we did something where we combined brands like Gallo for Jensen or Jensen for Gallo? I said, Marco, with all due respect to you, there's no way that first of all, that doesn't sound right. Jensen for Gallo, Gallo for Jensen. That sounds odd. I said, but you have the name, you have the storied history, you have the tailors, the bespoke tailors that you guys have trained up or been with. Like, one of our coat makers has been around since he was 12, working since he was 12 with them. So I was like, why don't I just join your brand? Why don't we just combine and just Jensen goes away and it's just Sartoria Gallo New York? because you already have this history and the storied presence in Italy, but you're not known in the U.S. And he said, that would be amazing. Would you be okay with that? I said, yeah, that would be an honor for me, because I'm working under the name that trained me, that started this whole crazy process in the beginning. So we joined brands. We, became 50-50 partners here in the U.S. And so that began that whole process. And that's really, really helped, because now I can cut and I can fit and I can make the patterns, but I don't have to do every aspect of it. And I've got guys in Italy who have been doing this, again, since they were 12, and they make just gorgeous, gorgeous pieces. So that's been the great thing. The second side of that question is that, no, I didn't go to school for business. And I went to school for...
Even if you did, it wouldn't have mattered.
Even if I did, it wouldn't matter.
They don't teach you anything that you can use.
I know. And I spent the greater part of my career in what I'm doing now, the 15 years of that, just learning how to do the stupid art. Like, this craft takes so much time. And it's like getting your PhD and your doctorate at the same time. Or like if you're going to school to be a brain surgeon, it's kind of that amount of time. So no brain surgeon has time to also figure out how to do business, So that was the thing that kind of has given me a headache, even still to this day, is I'm sure I could be doing business better. I'm sure there's an aspect of running the books or hiring the right people or, doing things like that would probably help in scaling the business. But it's something that I was never trained in. And at this point, I don't have time for it. So we're working on ways to kind of fix that problem. But, when Brioni, if anyone knows who Brioni is, when they started out, they were a legitimate tailoring house. So it was legitimately a bespoke tailor, and he was found by a businessman. Yeah. And that businessman and that bespoke tailor kind of joined forces and created what we know today. Yeah. As, even though it's lost some of its luster, it was once a really high-end bespoke tailoring house that also was able to understand how to do business at the same time. So that's something...
And that trend is actually, I forgot the name of it, but I've seen, I think there was one in Savile Row, there was like a hedge fund guy who came in and bought... Huntsman. Was it Huntsman?
Yeah, it was Huntsman.
And now,
And now they got a place here in New York, and and they're doing better.
But, so that makes sense.
So it's, because that's the thing, is like when you have an artist who spent his entire, good portion of his life learning the craft, he never took the time to figure out how to... be a bespoke tailor. To be a businessman at the same time. So, like you said, you never learned how to hammer a nail. Yeah. But you learned how to run a business correctly, and you knew how to do business, you knew how to market, you knew how to do all that stuff. And that's helped propel your business, because you've been able to hire people under you who know how to nail nails really well.
Yeah. I touch on the point because, and in my business you can relate to plumbers or electricians. Just because you're really good at doing whatever it is the business is doesn't mean you can run a business. Yeah. And there's a lot of struggles that come along with that because there's no, where do you learn it?
Yeah, exactly. So, you learn by trial and error and,
I want to talk about, the branding and the marketing and ultimately what gets people here. Your wife is excellent at, social media. Yeah. So I'm sure that's really a big help. But just kind of talk about, how you can make the most beautiful suit in the world, but if nobody knows you're here, it's for nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Then you're just doing a hobby.
Right. So how do you go about, really branding yourself in a place where it's great that you're the only person, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that appreciate it, but like we were talking about before, when I walk into a high-end club now, like I was for the first time in a long time this weekend, everyone's wearing like sweatshirts and sweatpants. It's like it's
usually with a brand on them too.
It's mind blowing. So how do you position the product? How do you get it out there for people?
There's a good thing about the way that I am and the business that I'm in, and the good thing about that is there's little to no competition. So if you want a bespoke Italian suit, like a suit that's made in the Italian tradition with the whole aspects and foundation of an Italian suit, and you want it bespoke, you want it handmade, and you don't want to wait for someone to travel, I'm the only game in the United States.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It's really quite cool. So because of that, and I make a great product, so because of that, I have clients who have told other clients, and that's how my business has grown.
Just word of mouth.
Yeah, it's been word of mouth, 90%. I do a couple things like this, with you and with Kirby Allison, but that's about it. So that's how I gain my clients. I want to find a way to grow that, to expand that. But again, that's probably a business aspect of something that I'm missing.
It also takes time.
Oh, well, yeah, and it takes time.
You haven't really, I mean, in the grand scheme of this, you haven't been doing this on your own like this for that long.
No, yeah. So I was on my own for about a year and 9 months, and then I've been under the Gallo name. In April, it'll be 1 year.
It really, I mean, they say, and this is true, it really takes minimum 3 to 5 years to really build a business.
Yeah, that's what I've
call
heard.
it 5 years.
Yeah.
So you're like starting to get into that, and it's moving.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Like we're moving. We're doing fantastic work. We're doing good turnaround. We're doing a good amount of growth year upon year. So, for that I can't complain. I think you always want to run faster than.
Of course.
Yeah, instead of
you always
crawl.
think you're behind. Like if you're an overachiever, you always wish you were a step ahead.
Yeah. Because someone else is always a step ahead, so you always like, for me, it's like, oh man, well, when I do a trunk show, I bring in X amount of people, but I see that when Huntsman does a trunk show, or when even a traveling tailor like Ambrosi or Rubinacci does a trunk show, they bring like 3 times what I bring in. So then it's like, oh man, I want to be them. But they've been around for like hundreds of years.
Yes.
So I guess you have to take everything in stride.
No, I listen. The product's beautiful. It was great. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
Yeah.
These things. I mean, if you're going to wear a suit at any point in time, you need to do this for yourself. You need to come here. You need to do this for yourself. They make great gifts for people. It's something that's very cool. Like I've given the gift of a suit to certain people that are very special to me and that I do a lot of business with. And there's nothing like it.
No, it's a completely different experience. I think for most people,
super cool experience
to ever go through. You not only get an incredible product at the end of it, but it's also the experience that is kind of a little life-changing as well. Especially because nowadays we're just point and click, we buy. So there's no affinity, there's no kind of relationship between client and whoever you're buying it from. But with us, like we have to have a relationship, because we see each other at least 4 to 5 times over the building of the suit, and I have to get to know you. Like I can build a suit how I want it to look, but you may never like it. Because you have things within your head that you don't want to see on your body, or you have things within your head how you want things to fit. And I have to learn that about you, or we're never going to get a suit that we both are happy with at the end of it. So there's a lot of a relationship between the two. And it's fun because you get to meet people like Handsome Homebuyer.
Thank you. It is a very, very, very cool experience, and unlike anything else you will do. So if you are for the real estate community, listen. I've seen you at networking events, mortgage brokers, realtors, etc. Your suits look terrible. You got to come here. If people are interested in scaling up and really getting a custom suit, how do they find you?
So you can find us on our website, sartoriagallo.com. Click the English button because everything's in Italian if you don't. If not, we're at 1298 Madison Avenue, floor 2. And if not, you can also find us on Instagram. So we're sartoria.gallo.nyc. You'll see the phone number and any contacts that way. Finally, you can email us if you just want some information. NewYork@sartoriagallo.com. I think that's it.
We'll put the links and everything down in the comments section. Again, really appreciate your time.
Dude, it's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have a house that smells like cat pee, dated from the 1960s, 6 inches of mold, land, commercial property, I want to buy it. 516-777 sold. That's a wrap.